The world's great novels. This is the story of Michael Henchard, a man of character. He was strong and yet weak, turbulent yet calm, hard and yet sentimental. And among the farming people of England's Wessex 100 years ago, he lived by his deeds and died by them and was judged for them. The NBC University of the Air brings you the fourth of a 5-part radio edition of Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge, another in the series of books that live, the world's great novels.
When Susan Henchard had died, she had revealed a secret. Her daughter, Elizabeth Jane, was not Michael Henchard's daughter, but really the child of Richard Newson, the sailor lost at sea. This discovery embittered Henchard, and he took his resentment out on Elizabeth Jane. It was then that Lucetta Templeton, an old flame of the mayor's, came to Casterbridge. They had been lovers before, and now Henchard, a very lonely man, planned to marry her. But Lucetta, who had hired Elizabeth Jane as her companion, became attracted to Henchard's bitter personal and business rival, Donald Farfrae. And Henchard swore to Lucetta that before he'd let her marry the young Scot, he'd blacken her reputation with scandal by revealing the close nature of their old friendship to the straight-laced people of Casterbridge. Now, Henchard, inflamed at Donald Farfrae, resolved to ruin him in the grain market. As the first step in that process, he hired a new foreman named Jop, a hard man not noted for his scruples.
Now, Jop, listen to me. There's one thing I want above all things.
Aye, Mr. Henchard.
I'm the biggest corn and hay dealer in these parts, and I'll brook no competition. Donald Farfrae must be cut out. You hear?
Aye?
Casterbridge is too small for both of us. If one has to go, it's going to be Farfrae.
That's all very well, sir, but how are you going to dislodge him? He's a shrewd trader.
He's not shrewder than Michael Henchard. I'm going to beat him by fair competition, Jop. I'm going to make such desperate bid for the farmer's custom as will grind him into the ground and starve him out.
But you're bound to lose revenue by bidding low, Mr. Henchard.
True. But I've more capital than he has, mind you. And I can do it.
Aye. But you seem uncommon set on ruining him, sir.
I've got other than just business reasons, Jop. I've got personal reasons, too. Mark me, the lad. This Farfrae's finished. I'm going to undersell him and overbuy him, and in the end, snuff him out.
Henchard and his foreman Jop went into the details of their scheme to ruin Farfrae, and the weather seemed to favor them. The weather was the big question mark in Wessex. Everything depended on it, and everything was the grain crop. A bad harvest would double the price of corn, and good prospects would lower it as much. Thus, the men of Casterbridge anxiously watched the weathercocks. As for Michael Henchard, he foresaw, and Jop agreed with him, but just to back his judgment, he visited a local forecaster called Wido.
Now then, Wido, answer me this. Can you forecast the weather?
Aye, with labor and time and for a consideration.
And take this. 'Tis a crown piece.
Ah.
Now, what is the harvest fortnight to be? Will it be fair or foul?
You ask me, and now I will tell you. By the sun, moon, and stars, by the clouds, the winds, the trees, and the grass, the candle flame and swallows, the smell of the herbs, likewise by the cat's eyes, the ravens, the leeches, and the spiders. The last fortnight in August will be rain and tempest.
You are sure of this? You are certain?
Aye, as certain as anyone can be in a world where all's unsure.
next day, Henchard bought grain to such an enormous extent that Casterbridge buzzed with excitement.
Why, Mrs. Coxon, Mayor's bought fortune in corn.
Aye, his bins be stuffed with it, and ricks stacked with it.
Which way do weathercocks point?
To southwest, and all's fair. But Mr. Henchard speculates on rain.
Look here, Maggie. Another hot and fair day.
Aye, and Myers choked with corn.
And to market going down, and corn cheaper every day.
Poor Mr. Henchard. Having to sell him grain at many shillings a quarter cheaper as him bought it.
Aye, the weather be fair, and yet it's played him dirty.
Did you hear? Did you hear?
No, Christopher.
Why, Mrs.
What?
Coxon, it's all about the town. Sun keeps a-shining, and harvest good, and the mayor's lost a fortune.
And what about young Mr. Farfrae?
Yeah, there's a shrewd one, that young Scot. He must have magic glass to foretell the harvest. He bought little and saved his capital.
The sun mocked Henchard, burned him within. He shook his fist at it, cursed it. For weeks it had the hue of tin, and later assumed the color of topaz, and not a rain cloud appeared in the sky. He had backed bad weather and lost. The forecaster Wido had been wrong, and now he was forced to unload his grain at a staggering loss. Henchard, in a boiling frenzy, looked about for someone to blame, and Jop, who was with him in the marketplace, was convenient.
Well, it's another fine hot day, Mr. Henchard.
Aye, you can wipe your forehead and say a fine hot day. But if it hadn't been for your blasted advice, Jop, it might have been a fine day enough.
My advice, sir?
Your advice, Jop, blast you. Why, a word of doubt from you, a word of caution, and I'd have thought twice.
Now, wait a minute, Mr. Henchard. I nor no man can foretell the weather.
No, but you might have given me a word of restraint. And because you didn't, I've lost heavy. And that Donald Farfrae over there cleaned up. Why, if this goes on, he'll be mayor of Casterbridge instead of me.
Let's look it in the eye, Mr. Henchard. He guessed the weather right, and we was wrong.
What? You're impertinent, Jop.
I tell the truth.
Begad, you're implying that Farfrae's a better man than I. I'll thank you to keep a cautious tongue in your head. You hear me, Jop?
It's you who are throwing coal on the fire, not I.
Enough! I'll take no more from you, Jop. You're discharged from my employ as of now. You hear me? You're sacked.
You'll be sorry for this, Mr. Henchard. Sorry as a man can be.
Aye, you blast.
Oh, Mayor, Mr. Henchard.
What is it, Farfrae?
They tell me the market's put you in a tight corner.
Well, what have you come to do? Make a holiday of it?
No, Mr. Henchard. I come to express my sympathy. Believe me, I am sorry, and I hope you recoup.
You do?
With all my heart.
Why? Why do you express these sentiments to me?
Because once we were friends instead of rivals, and because I would renew that friendship if I could.
Well, now, listen to me, Farfrae. What we were never can be again. 'Tis true that I've had a little setback, but I've still capital left, and you'll feel the weight of it in time to come.
Almost on the eve of harvest, Farfrae suddenly switched into a buying mood and picked up grain at rock-bottom prices. Then, as if by a signal, the sun was blotted out and the heavens seemed to open in rainy tempest. The air felt as though watercress could grow in it. It rubbed people's cheeks like wet flannel. The price of grain shot up, and Farfrae made a great profit on the rise of the market. But Michael Henchard stood in the fields and stared up at the wet sky, dazed and heartsick.
Go on. Rain. Drown the earth. Forecaster was right. I should have held on to my wheat a little longer. I'd have made the profit, not Farfrae. Now I am ruined. Even the heavens are laughing at me. But Michael Henchard is not through yet. You hear? I'll fight as long as there's fight in me, to the bitter end.
Thus Michael Henchard spoke, but already his power and prestige were beginning to wane as the star of Donald Farfrey rose high in the heavens. He saw the young Scot walking through the fields, hand in hand with Lucetta Templeton, and his hatred flared to a white-hot heat. Finally, unable to endure it any longer, he went to High Place Hall, resolved to come to a decision with Lucetta.
Look here, Lucetta. I have a little matter to remind you of which you seem to forget.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
You will hear it. You came to Casterbridge to marry me. Here I am. When shall we name the hour and date?
No, Michael, there can be no marriage between us.
Is it because I have lost my money?
No.
Then it's Donald Farfrey for sure.
Yes. For sure.
I see. I suspected it before and accused you of it. But now I am certain, from your own lips. And be assured of this, Lucetta. I'll not let him have you.
How can you interfere? How can you say this?
Because I am as good a man as he is.
If you were as good as he, you'd leave me.
No, Lucetta. I want you myself, and I'll have you. You'll marry me, or I'll tell the people of the town that we were sweethearts long ago.
No, you couldn't.
But I could. In fairness to other men. In fairness to Farfrey himself, I certainly would. Well, Lucetta, will you marry me now?
Yes. It seems I have no choice.
Now you're being sensible. Here, I'll ring for Elizabeth Jane.
Why do you want her here?
As a witness. I am a stickler for what is right and proper.
Good evening, Father.
Well, Elizabeth Jane, you're looking well. Very well indeed.
Miss Templeton, you look so pale. Is something wrong?
No. No, nothing's wrong.
Elizabeth Jane, there is something I want you to hear.
Yes, Father?
The answer to a question. Now then, Lucetta, will you or will you not marry me?
If you wish it, then I must agree.
Then you say aye.
Now, Michael, will you go?
Very well. I'll bid good evening to you both.
Miss Templeton, what has happened? You called my father Michael, as if you knew him well.
Yes. I told you I knew him long ago.
But you do not want to marry him. I can see that in your face, in your eyes. What power does he have over you that he can force you to marry him against your will?
Someday, Elizabeth Jane, you'll find out. I can't tell you now. But one day you'll know everything.
Michael Henchard had scored a temporary victory. In his heart, he knew that he was marrying Lucetta Templeton not so much for the fact that he wanted her for himself, but rather to hurt the man he hated over all men, Donald Farfrey. But he did not know, even then, what fate was holding in store for him. The next morning, as mayor and town magistrate, he sat as judge in petty sessions. A filthy old woman was on trial for vagrancy and disturbing the peace, and just as Henchard was about to sentence her, the old hag spoke up.
Ye cannot sentence me. Ye up there in judge's seat. Ye've no right to sit in judgment on me.
I have not. And why not, old woman?
Because you know better than me. And I can be judged only by me betters. You laugh, do ye? Well, listen to me then. 20 years ago, I was a-selling a vermity in a tent at Wayne Fair.
We
don't care to hear your life's history, old woman.
Wait, Clark. Let her speak. Old woman, do you say you sold Dermody at Wayton Priors?
Hey, Judge. A man and a woman and a child came into me tent, and the man, being drunk, sold his wife and child for 5 guineas. A scandalous affair it was, and the man should be hung for it. Judge?
You, know this man now?
I know him. It was ye, Judge. Ye were the man what done this foul deed, and you've no right to judge me now.
The news created a sensation in the courtroom. Without another word, Michael Henchard tore off his judicial robes and walked out. Like wildfire, the news spread through Casterbridge. Idlers in front of the town hall, the merchants along High Street, the toilers in the fields, they all buzzed with it. The great man, the mayor, Mr. Henchard, had fallen into disrepute. And then, finally...
By popular vote of the people of Casterbridge, counted in front of and by the commissioners of the town council, it has been ascertained that our new mayor is Mr. Donald Farfrae.
One by one, the blows drove Michael Henchard further and further down like a sledge hammering a spike into the earth. He was a man twisted and torn and stripped of everything that made life worthwhile to him. His back against the wall financially, his reputation blackened and ruined, his hated rival, now mayor of Casterbridge, and the bitter gall of seeing Donald Farfrae's star rise as his went down. But he still had Lucetta Templeton, and now he needed her more than ever.
Lucetta, I need your help.
Do you want me to advance you some money, Michael?
No. I am not the man to sponge on a woman. But this is the way of it, Lucetta. My chief creditor is a man named Grower.
Grower?
Aye. He can ruin me if he decides to close in now. But if I have a fortnight, I can pull through.
What do you want me to do?
Go to Grower. Ask him to wait a fortnight. Tell him we are to be married. I know that you are quite friendly with him, Lucetta, and I am sure he will grant your request.
Michael, I can't.
No? Why not? It is such a little thing.
I just can't.
Suppose you tell me why you are so reluctant to do me this favor. Why, Lucetta?
Because Mr. Grower was a witness.
A witness? Of what?
Michael, please don't upbraid me, please.
What was Mr. Grower a witness of, Lucetta?
My marriage.
Marriage?
Yes. To Donald Farfrae. We were married at Port Brady a week ago. Mr. Grower was there at the time and served as a witness.
You were pledged to me, and you married him. The man I hate more than anything on earth. And you sneaked off and married him.
Michael, don't be cruel. I love him so much. I had to marry him at once before you told him of our past together. I knew I should lose him if he heard any scandal.
I see. You are a clever woman, Lucetta.
Michael, for the love of heaven, don't tell him about us now. I beg you, Michael, please listen to me.
You played me false. I should punish you the way you deserve. One word to this new husband of yours of how you courted me, and your precious happiness is blown to bits.
I'll do anything, Michael. I'll give you money. I'll help you pay off your debts.
You do not know me even yet, Lucetta. Me, a pensioner of Donald Farfrae's wife? No, not me. I'd see you and your money rot first.
Oh, Michael, have pity on me. This is the first happiness I've ever had. The first security. The first real chance. Don't ruin me now. Don't ruin me now.
Henchard, under the influence of Lucetta's tearful pleading, decided to remain silent a while. But further events conspired to send him spiraling downward, broken and beaten. As he walked, he looked more at the pavements and less into the eyes of men he once knew and stared down. Now he was a social pariah and practically a pauper. The creditors called for their money, and he could not satisfy them. And so he went before the council commissioners in bankruptcy, with Mayor Farfrey regretfully presiding, and signed away his lands and house and furnishings to be sold at auction to pay his debts. Now he stood stripped of all that had symbolized his power and glory. Once more, he was nobody. And then, one day, he met Jop, the old foreman he had fired when fortune turned against him.
Well, Mr. Henchard, you're beginning to look a bit down at the heels, ain't you now?
My looks be me own business, and I'll thank you not to talk to me.
You can't be a chooser now, you know. I'm one of the few in Casterbridge who'll give you a word these days. I suppose you'll be leaving soon.
I keep my intentions to myself, and you might do the same.
Hoity-toity, Mr. Once-upon-a-time Mayor. I suppose you haven't heard that Mayor Farfrey and his wife have gone into their new house today.
Huh? What new house?
Why, your old one, of course.
My house?
Aye. They bought it at auction, and your furniture, too.
My house? My furniture? Gad, how much can a man stand, Jop? How much? If I stay here any longer, he'll own me body and soul.
Ah, then you are going to leave after all.
Does not matter if anyone knows now. I'm leaving Casterbridge tomorrow.
The news spread through Casterbridge, as all news does, and finally it reached Donald Farfrey's ears. The young Scot hurried to the humble cottage where Henchard was now living and rapped on the door.
Come in. Farfrey.
Hi. I want to speak to you, Michael. I've heard you're leaving town.
Aye.
What will you do? Where will you go?
I came to Casterbridge as a hairdresser. I can leave it as one. I still have my knife and wimble and basket, and no man can take them away from me.
Michael, now listen to me. Stay here in Casterbridge.
Huh? And do what?
Michael, I must ask you a question man to man. I ask you to forget your pride and what has gone before. I ask you to believe me when I say I do not speak out of pity.
Well, what is it, Farfrey?
Will you stay in Casterbridge and work for me?
Work? For you?
Aye. You'll do much better with me than for strangers. And you know grain in spite of your misfortunes.
No. No, it is kind of you, but I cannot.
You should, Michael. You know where you owe it to me.
Huh? I owe it to you.
Aye. Remember when I first came here? I wanted to leave. You persuaded me to stay and work for you.
I remember.
I stayed against my will, and later was happy. You can do the same. Now, Michael, I ask you again. Will you stay and work for me?
Very well, Donald. I'll stay, and thank you for it.
There's no thanks needed. And, oh, Michael, by the way.
Aye?
You heard I bought your furniture?
So I heard.
Well, I did not want it for myself. It's worth more to you than to me, for sentiment's sake. Come and pick out what you need.
Huh? Donald, sometimes I think I've wronged you.
Now the pendulum had swung its full, far course. Now Henchard was working as a hay trusser, his occupation of long ago. Thus he had come to Casterbridge 20 years ago, and to this he had returned, working as a laborer in the barns and granaries which once he had owned, but that now belonged to Donald Farfrae. He had felt a momentary gratitude to the Scot, but now the humility of his position preyed upon him, and his old hatred returned. He brooded on it, and spoke of it to Elizabeth Jane.
There he be, Elizabeth Jane. There he be, sitting in the old place, the mayor's chair, and living in the fine house, and laughing at me working in the hayricks.
No, Father. I'm quite sure Mr. Farfrae isn't laughing at you.
No? Then he pities me. That is even worse. Well, it'll only be 12 days more. Only 12 days more, and there'll be an escape.
Father, what do you mean, 12 days more? What escape?
You will see, Elizabeth Jane. You will see.
12 days later, the denizens at the Inn of the Three Mariners were startled to see Michael Henchard come into the door and advance to the bar. There was a grim, set look on his face, a wild flame in his eyes. He smashed his heavy fist upon the bar.
Whiskey, keeper! Whiskey! And be quick about it.
Whiskey for you, Mr. Henchard, but you've never taken a drink.
Aye, I be a man of my word. I swore an oath never to take a drink of spirits for 21 years. Now that time be over, and my oath be done. Well, keeper, what are you standing there for? You heard me, did you not? Whiskey!
Aye, sir.
That's it. That's what I've needed these 21 years. That's what I need to stand me up when I do him in.
Do who in, Mr. Henchard?
Donald Farfrae. Who else?
Oh, well, now.
Well, what are you staring at me for? Did you think I'd stand by and see him take everything away from me? Did you? By heaven, no. I be still a better man than he be. Aye, better than he be. I'll break him like I broke that glass upon the floor. Mark me. It's the word of Michael Henchard. I'll break Donald Farfrae if it's the last thing I do.
The NBC University of the Air has brought you the fourth in a 5-part radio edition of The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. Next week, we'll bring you the final episode. All the great novels you've heard on this series may be obtained from your local library. To those of you who have enjoyed this series and are eager to know more about the books we're opening for your pleasure, we suggest that you get full value from them by reading Herbert Gorman's Handbook of the World's Great Novels. 25 cents will cover the cost of printing and mailing. Requests for this handbook should be mailed to the World's Great Novels, Post Office Box 30, Station J, New York 27, New York. The script you've just heard was adapted for radio by Max Ehrlich. Members of the cast included Boris Aplon as Henchard, Geraldine Kay as Elizabeth Jane, Uriel Bremner as Lucetta, William Everett as Farfrae, Wilms Herbert as Jop, and Donald Gallagher as the narrator. Others were Hilda Graham, Hope Summers, Kurt Kupfer, Cliff Norton, and Fred Sullivan. The music was composed by Emil Soderstrom and the orchestra conducted by Joseph Galicchio. The entire production was under the direction of Homer Heck. This program came to you from Chicago. This is NBC.